Tom, I want to just acknowledge you with that nice twang you had in there. That was lovely. It's turned out to be the best day ever for sure. So I would imagine most of you have heard that phrase before. And most of you have ideas on where it came from and all that. Yeah. So, there's this thing about being famous. If a famous person actually says something in public, it becomes theirs whether they thought it up or not. Like Nelson Mandela in his speech, using Merriam-Webster's words, they became Nelson Mandela's words. I'm pretty sure that Michael Beckwith did not come up with this phrase, because there's actually a poem that's been around a long time. It was written by the same person that wrote our sing-along, Unknown. It's called A Reason, a Season, a Lifetime. So it really doesn't matter where it came from. It's an interesting idea. And when I gave that title for my message to Nancy this week, she's always pestering me for my title. So I was so proud that I didn't wait for her to ask. I just put it on her desk. And then it started working on me. And in my kind of exploring what it means, my intention was, let's talk about what's a relationship like around the idea of a reason, and then a season, and then a lifetime, and how are they different? That just wouldn't come. Now, it's an important notion. I'm not suggesting it's not, but it's just working me in a different direction. So it's not going to be a whole lot about that. There are four things in our lives. I call them 4 pillars of life that everything comes from. It's our health, it's our reason, or our ideas around prosperity or wealth, it's our relationships, and it's our way we express into the world. Those 4 things, everything fits into that. I want to talk about relationships, because that's kind of what this thing is about. What are your relationships like? Well, and as I explored this, what I realized is whether it's for an exact period of time, your entire life, or a passing moment, every relationship you ever had a reason. So that's as far as you need to go, is that there's a reason. The point is that many things that happen to us, we don't get the reason. And we kind of miss it, which means that we're going to have to keep doing it with different people till we get it. Like marriages. You're going to do it till you get it. If you think that person was the problem, you're going to have to do it till you realize that the common thread between you and all your relationships is you. And that you're the one that's creating that experience. However, these people that show up in our lives, no matter how long, and the idea that the idea of a reason comes from this idea that time is not an element. Content is what makes it a reason, not how long. I mean, there's a reason that you cursed at someone while you were driving in traffic. They pushed your button. They don't even know your name. They didn't even see your face. And yet, they have the ability to push your button. Yeah, well, maybe it's you. Maybe it's you. Still. So what could be the lesson that we are meant to get from everybody that passes in our lives, whether it is a traffic incident or whether it's the person that holds our heart for most of our lives? It's so that we can know who we are. That's really the whole purpose, is for us to know who we are. And that person, no matter what they are saying or what they are doing, is calling us to know who they are, to know who we are, so that we may know that the presence of the divine dwells at the point of us. Sometimes it really takes somebody being nasty to help us see that. Sometimes it takes some effort. Sometimes it's a blessing that's so rich and so beautiful that we just adore the experience. Neither of those is more important than the other. They are both important. And anything in between on that continuum. The question is, are we paying enough attention to get the lesson? Are we watching? Well, there are all kinds of tools that we use in our lives to try to wake us up and keep us present for what we need to do. Relationships are truly, if you look at those ideas of health, wealth, relationships, and self-expression, Health is an inside job. I control my health. And sometimes I give my power away to a doctor or some other kind of health professional to tell me what's going on, and then I buy into that, and then I presume that. So I can be influenced by an outside thing. Wealth, I can also be influenced by an outside thing, but really, as with health, it's really about how do I perceive it? How do I perceive that existing in my life? Barbara got some of the wonderful experiences being around Edwene, and I just am watching that unfold in her life right now. It's wonderful. But it was Barbara's choice to go sit at a retreat center in Alabama. Such courage. With a lot of unity ministers. And you know, from a Presbyterian point of view, unity and science of mind are the same thing, but not from where we are. Bless their hearts. They're wonderful people. I mean it. I know. They're wonderful people. They just don't necessarily see it exactly like we do. And that's okay, because there's room for everybody at the table. So this idea of health and wealth, and then you got relationships, which is all about the reflection of others, of us reflecting through somebody back to ourselves. What is it we need to learn about ourselves? Self-expression starts at the point of us going out, but it too comes back, and we have to keep monitoring what's out there so that we know what's going on in here. So they're all the same kind of game. They're all about reflecting of life, but relationships, wow, what a special one. Because we want to be loved. God, do we want to be loved and appreciated and admired? We want people to think they're the way we want them to think of us. Okay? We don't want them to be thinking about all that angst that we have on the inside that keeps coming up. We have to keep dealing with it. It keeps coming up and we deal with it. At least I think most of us have that in our lives. They come into our lives and they bring stuff up. How could you say that to me? Why would you do such a thing? We question them as though they're somehow separate from us. And we aren't willing to look back here. But the truth is that every relationship that we have with some other person is really all about what's going on right here. They couldn't be in our lives. Barbara could not have experienced Edwene last week had she not gotten in a car and driven all the way to Alabama. That's the only way that was going to happen. Yes, Edwene comes here, that's true, but she's in and out, in a day, in a morning. But when you go over there, you sit there for 3 or 4 days with her, it's a little different. It looks different. And that's the nature of relationships. Some of them are very quick, and some of them take longer for us to get it. That's okay, it's all good. So there's a tool I use in my life to kind of say, where are my reflections that I want to look at and claim for myself? Where are those things happening? And I started this years and years and years ago. In fact, I did it with some Tony Robbins stuff. He asked us, thousands of people in a room, I don't remember where, I think it was Tampa. He said, well, who are the models in your life? Who do you model yourself after? Who's a good teacher? You don't have to know them personally. You might, but who are the people in your life that you want to emulate, that you so admire, that there's something inside of you that wants to come out because you've met that person, because you've heard that person, because you know what that person did in the world? Who are your models? Oh, I'm a pragmatist. I didn't pick Jesus or Buddha or anybody of that sort. But I picked 4 men that each one, in their own somehow peculiar way, really influenced my life. And I want to introduce you to them this morning. Oh, I've got to turn the thing on. Hey, I'm getting better, guys. That looks like it's on. Huh. No, this works. Because I practiced it. There he is. This is Ken Dyer. He was my first teacher, my first spiritual teacher. I was, 29, 30 years old. My life had just gone down the crapper, as they say. I had a very successful business in Houston, Texas. I grew up in Miami, moved to Houston, followed a woman out there, married her, had a son. She had another son, so we had a family of 4. I started an oil field equipment business, which thrived for a few years. And then the bust came, and the bottom fell out of the whole oil industry in the early 80s, and I lost everything, including my family. The whole thing just went away. So what do? I ran away as far as I could get. I went to Australia. It's as far as you can get. China's not on the other side of the planet, Australia is. And fortunately, they speak a form of English, so it really made it easy for me to go down there and start over, saying I'm never coming back to the United States. I'm done with that. I'm going to be a beach bum on the beaches of Australia, whatever. It took all of 3 days to meet this man. He broke me wide open. He told me that there was a power in me, that I knew he was right, and I just had to deal with it. I had to say, okay, I'll look at this. But he saw it in me really quick. He had me up on stage the first night that he was giving a lecture. He showed me what love was. And I had to stay, I had to learn, I had to immerse myself in who he was. His background was in Zen Buddhism and Scientology. But he had left the Church of Scientology. He just took all their information. And he shared it with me, and it really was amazing. So I had an amazing year in Sydney, Australia with this man. My mom called one day and said, you gotta come home, your son's in trouble. So I went to Ken, and I said, Ken, I've got to go back to the United States, but I'll be right back. He said, no, you won't. He was right, of course. But he loved me enough to let me go, and he had taught me enough that I was no longer a danger to myself. That's big, because I had been. So I left there, and I went to Florida, and it took me about 3 days to find Barbara, and she carried me from that moment. But this relationship is far too intimate and close for me to bring her into this pool of people. These are models. But on that road of coming here, I was actually we were attending the Unity Church, and one of the men that was sitting in a men's circle with me, we met out on the Unity property, said, I'm doing a vision quest. And I said, what's that? And he told me more, and I went and sat down with the man that was leading that. Bill Rocking. This man taught me about impeccability. He said, what you think and what you say and what you do must be the same if you're going to get where you want to get to in this life. Now, have I mastered that? No. But I'm much better at it than I was before I met this one. Good teacher. Good teacher. Sometimes he really upset me. But the truth is there are times I really upset him. So it was kind of balanced. He never stopped loving me, no matter what. He reminded me I wasn't quite as evolved as I thought I was. And he helped me slow down and realize that there's more things to know in life than I can get if I'm whizzing through. Yes. The next one. Gary Dahl. Yes, the creator of the pet rock. Think about that. The man was a marketing genius. He made over $1 million. And this was, like, I don't know, was in the 80s, 70s, somewhere in there, that he came up with the idea of taking a box, putting into it some fluff and a rock, closing it up and selling it for $20 at Neiman Marcus. What a great idea! I just love this guy. I'll stop here and tell you that that Ken Dyers passed about 5 years ago. Rocking Bear a little over 2 years ago. Gary passed 3 weeks ago. And I found that out this morning when I was researching that. It was the last one I looked at. But really, thank you, Gary. Never met him. Never met him, just loved the idea of creating something out of nothing like that. And the fourth one. Dr. Robert Schuller. How about that for an icon? Yeah, I'm reaching on this one, aren't I? But I tell you what, it's not impersonal. In fact, when he passed just a few days ago, there were lots of stories, and I'll share some with you in a minute, but what I realized was I couldn't just put out some of my thoughts about Robert Schuller. It was way too personal. I always admired this man. When I was a Southern Baptist, I admired this man. I knew he had something special. I remember early in my life, when I was in my 20s, early 20s, maybe 20, 21 years old, I began this quest to find my purpose. I heard him on the Hour of Power one day state his purpose. Wait! I grabbed a pen and I wrote it down as best I could remember what he had just said, and I tried to craft mine around it. And what I remember about it is that his life was about creating something out of nothing. And he did. He created so much out of nothing but ideas. He was such an idea man. An amazing man in that regard. And what a good teacher for so many people. So, I didn't know him personally, I just admired him from afar, and I made him one of my models. And then one day, when I was in my doctoral program, one of my teachers in my doctoral program was invited to the Crystal Cathedral for a conference on youth violence. And he couldn't go. And they said to him, "Can you recommend someone?" And he recommended me. So out of nowhere, living in Fairview, North Carolina, working on my doctorate, I was invited to the Crystal Cathedral to be a facilitator. Not to be a major speaker, but to be a participant in working with ministers of the Christian faith, Catholic priests, Jewish rabbis, the imams of the Muslim communities, to talk about how young people in America were too many of them were headed down a violent path, and how we could turn that around, move young people, especially young men, away from gangs and gang violence. And I was thrilled to be there, and I got to meet so many amazing people, including Schuller. And we had this wonderful conference. The man that was putting it together, his name was David Scotes, and I went to David at the end of it, and I said, "David, I want to be a part of this. I don't know how that works, but if you're going to do something with this project, I want to do it." It took almost a year, but David called me one day and he said, "Robert Schuller Ministries wants to do a program called Peacemakers, and we want you to put it together." And so I did. And I actually used the data from the symposia that I organized in a number of different cities: Washington, Detroit, Seattle, Los Angeles, and some other cities. And I used all that material from those gatherings of secular people, judges, police, mayors, and many of the strongest churches in those communities on ideas on how we support young people to get away from this. And some powerful things came out of that. And it was a real turning point in my life. And then suddenly the project was over and I was on my own again. But it was interesting because that was the year we founded this community. And the money that I made on that project is what actually seeded this community. Because there wasn't much money coming in. We were a little community meeting in a tiny place in Fairview. But by the end of that year, we were standing on our own. So that was a really interesting way that it fit into the fabric of my life. And of course, because of that, I was there a lot. I got to go to 2 or 3 of the wonderful church leadership conferences that he would put on every year, hearing ministers from many faiths come and talk about how to build a sustainable, powerful ministry. And it was good, it was wonderful, it was delightful. But it was personal too, because I watched him think of ideas. They didn't all take. They didn't all happen, but enough of them happened to make a difference. Now you can point to the fact that there were financial problems at the end of the ministry, that beautiful building, the Crystal Cathedral, was sold to the Catholic Church because the organization was in debt. That's all true. You could talk about the inner squabbling of the Schuller family. It's all true. But you cannot take away the success of this man. He wrote 30 books in his life. Listen to just a few of the titles. 5 of them were bestsellers. Way to the good life. You can be the person you want to be. Tough times never last. But tough people do. The power of being debt-free. I'm getting that one. Move ahead with possibility thinking. Success is never ending. Failure is never final. Life's not fair, but God is good. And prayer, my soul's adventure with God. Again, many stories talked about during or after his passing, especially with ministers in our movement. That's how he started. Talking to people in their cars in a drive-in movie theater from the top of a snack shop. And there, I don't know that this is true, but it has been said by many people in our movement that Ernest Holmes stood there with an invitation from Robert Schuller to speak to those people one morning. You know what their motto was when they were there? Come as you are in your family car. And through the entire time with that elegant, beautiful crystal cathedral, there was still a parking lot that had a big screen on the northwest side of the property where you could sit and watch it from your car. Now that's just goofy because you could watch it on TV too. I was a week behind, but if you want to see the live one, you didn't have to come in. You could still come in your jammies and watch from your car. Quite amazing. It's also said that Schuller took classes at Founders Church in Los Angeles. That he went to classes taught by Bill Hornaday. So there's a strong possibility that he was influenced by our movement. And I know that we were influenced by his movement, that he truly created something extraordinary out of nothing. They asked him to move from another part of the country. I forget, he was in the Midwest somewhere, and he had built a church from 35 people to 400. And they moved him. They could do that in these other teachings. They have bishops and things. So they moved him to Orange, California. And so what did he do to start his church? He knocked on 3,000 doors. He went home to home, asking people to come check it out at the drive-in. And they did, and they filled the place again and again. And then he built a lovely church that had been in Orange Grove in Garden Grove, California, and used that as his church for a number of years, and then got the notion, hired a couple of high-profile architects from New York City, wanted to build a modern-day cathedral. And he did. He built a beautiful cathedral. That's him standing in it. About 5,000 seats in that room. I spent a lot of time in that room. I spoke from that stage. No one else was in the room. But I got up there and gave it my all. I walked all over that building just taking it in. It was amazing. I just recently heard the story about how they paid for that. Just before they were ready to move in, it wasn't quite finished. Schuller said he didn't want to move in until it was paid for. And they owed $5 million. I know. So here's what he did. Listen to this. Anybody know who Beverly Sills is? Yes. The famous operatic soprano, the greatest voice of her time. He convinced her to come to Orange, California and do a concert. He took the amount of money that was owed on the building, divided it by the number of seats, about 5,000, and he charged that per seat. It was about $1,000 a seat. And they sold out. Frank Sinatra bought a whole row. Yeah. And they paid for it before they moved in. Cool. Clever thinking, out-of-the-box thinking. That's who he was. That's what he brought that was so amazing. As he grew older, they would not let him walk around on the property by himself because they would lose him. He'd end up going somewhere, doing something, and nobody could find him, and they would freak. You know, Schuller's been kidnapped. No, of course not. He's just over there doing that. He had a ministry of prayer. It was available 24/7, still is. Anybody wants to call and ask for prayer, they can do it. I'm sure that was an inspiration to our World Ministry of Prayer, or perhaps our World Ministry of Prayer was an inspiration to him. One way or the other, we're doing that work of prayer, and we know how important that is, to be there for people. So this man touched my life in amazing ways, but not everybody liked Robert Schuller. I found a story that just fascinated me about a man who really didn't like him. This is after he said, put a quote in Christianity Today. He was interviewed, and this is what he said. I don't think anything has been done in the name of Christ or under the banner of Christianity that has proven more destructive to human personality than to offer crude, uncouth, and unchristian strategies of attempting to make people aware of their loss and their sinful condition. He's saying, that's not good to do that. That's not Christian to tell people that they're lost and that they're sinners. So he made some enemies out of that, because some people think that's exactly what you're supposed to do. One of them was a man, a man named Richard Mouw, who's a well-known American theologian and was the president of the Fuller Theological Seminary back in the 90s. And he was one of Schuller's biggest critics. He talked about how Schuller was a sham. And when he went to that school and became involved in that school, a group of students came to him and said, please stop it. We are Christians because of Robert Schuller. We are in this theological seminary because Robert Schuller awakened us to the beauty of being a Christian that we heard nowhere else. So when you put him down, you're putting us down. The man had a new sense of things, and now says that Schuller was truly one of the great teachers of the 20th century. And he was. Schuller had some important things to say. He called his teaching possibility thinking. It came out of the positive thinking of his mentor, Norman Vincent Peale. And Peale was in the same Reformed church that he was, and he took Peale's work to the next level. Here's an example of what he wrote. However large the obstacle, however big the block, however threatening the feeling, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. You may not know the final destination, but there is always a solution. A possibility thinker turns straw into gold, creates something out of nothing. When it appears the odds are stacked against you, ask yourself, what is possible here? Get creative. You can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. Be willing to play with different options until you feel an inner light bulb switch on that shows you the way ahead. That's the way the man dealt with life, right there. There's an answer to everything. We're stronger than that. We're clearer than that. We're better than that. And we'll find a way through it. And he had a lifetime of stories about doing just that, again and again and again. So, a model in my life, someone who has helped me see that there's more going on than I see at first. Someone who could demonstrate for me an amazing way to be in the world. How wonderful it is to know the truth of who he is. Because he is me. And you too have models in your life. Someone's come into your life for a reason. You're aware of some people in your life because they resonate with you. Because there's something going on in you that is in alignment with who they are. You admire them. You hold them up. They're your models. If you haven't done this, I invite you. Figure out who your models are. And figure out why they're your models. What is it about that person that is so valuable to me, that touches me so deeply, that it makes a difference in my life and how I am in the world? Let them influence you. Let them touch your heart. It doesn't matter whether they're alive or gone. All four of mine are gone. But still, they're in my heart. They're in my thinking. They're in my way of being in the world. That's not going to change. I want it to be that way. So I invite you to find those that give you the best reason to be who you are and to be who you claim that you want to be beyond who you are today. There's great things in you. So this is your homework. You right, Jonelle? Figure out who your top 4 models are. Write them down and write down why you pick them. And then put that somewhere where you're going to see it all the time. So you'll remember this is what you're called to be in the world. an amalgamation of these great people. Let that be your truth. Because what you think is who you are. That's the truth. I love you very much. God bless you.